It's bottom of the pile Southampton hosting 4th place Tottenham, and joining us to look ahead to this one, it is the former Spurs and Saints defender, Chris Perry. Chris, good morning. How are you?
Morning,
Chris.
Natalie. Morning, Cass.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Glad to hear you're keeping well. This is an interesting one, looking ahead to Spurs' visit to Southampton. Southampton come into this having lost in midweek at home to Brentford. 2-0 was that score, although in all fairness, Southampton had chances. It just came down to not being clinical, and I guess that's one of the biggest problems that Southampton are finding, just not being able to really put goals in the back of the net.
Absolutely, yeah. If you look at their last 10 at home, they've not scored more than 1 goal in any of those, and it's very difficult to win games in the Premier League when you're not scoring enough goals.
And Ward-Prowse, last year he was their top goal scorer. So far this season, he's their top goal scorer in the Premier League. It just shows you their problem in forward areas.
Yeah, exactly that. They've been looking for a centre forward, really struggling for a centre forward for a long time now. They've got a very young team there. They've got players who work their socks off playing up front in Shea Adams, Adam Armstrong, players like that. But none of those players are really prolific goal scorers. And if they could find someone who could get them 15 to 20 goals a season, they'd be much further up the table.
What did you make of Theo Walcott coming back into the team? Because he seemed to be an outcast for quite a long time, and yet there was a little bit of lift when Theo got back in the side.
I think he's always going to give you a lift, isn't he? Someone of that experience, someone who's played at the highest level, international football. I think for whatever reason, under the last 2 managers, certainly this season, he wasn't first choice, and they brought in a lot of young players that they've tried to sort of play in those positions. But he brings you experience, and he's still quick. He can still cause defences problems. Probably should have scored at Old Trafford last week, and if he had, they might have come away with 3 points.
It's obviously dire straits for Southampton currently, although, there has been a bit of an uplift with Ruben Sellés in charge, having taken over from Nathan Jones. And the fans certainly have got behind Sellés, which wasn't the case when Jones was in charge.
No, absolutely. Nathan Jones, for whatever reason, was a bit of a disaster of an appointment, wasn't it? Just didn't work at all. Ruben Sellés obviously worked under Ralph Hasenhüttl, knows the players really, really well. And I think you can see he's got a good relationship with the players. It's a young squad, and sometimes it's players that have worked with them and have come through with those players those players are going to listen to more and will have more effect on those players. And I think they'll give themselves. I think he's going to give them the best chance of staying up.
Chris, what do you make of Spurs? Because it seems like they're going to meltdown every other week. They're in a good position, then they lose like a game like today, and you think, well, what's going to be the reaction? Is it going to be Conte again? Is it going to be Harry Kane? It feels like every other week it's a different narrative towards Tottenham and where they are and what they're going to become by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's the inconsistency that has plagued Spurs for the last 30 years, really, isn't it? They can produce some fantastic performances, and they can produce a little run of results where you think, oh, they've turned the corner. And then they get the old Spursy thing comes along and they lose to someone they shouldn't. Horrific defeat at Leicester, losing 4-1 at Leicester was completely out of the blue. And, good result last week, but they've lost 3 of the last 4 away, and they've been really inconsistent on the road.
Yeah, very much so. And they've not scored in 3, I think, of their last 4 on the road as well. But the interesting thing here with Spurs I find fascinating is we talk about this meltdown because we don't know what's going to happen with Antonio Conte. The Kane scenario is still a little bit up in the air with his contract and everything. And yet, actually, when you look at where they are on the table, they're sitting 4th. It can't all be that bad.
No, it's not. Absolutely. They're in 4th place. I mean, obviously, the result last night wasn't a good one for them. Newcastle now 1 point behind with a game in hand. Liverpool with a game in hand. Brighton with 2 games in hand. It looks as though they're going to have to find some consistency that they found at the end of last season, where they had a brilliant end to the season and ended up finishing in 4th place.
Well, see, the thing is, if you're sitting in 4th, Chris, and you've lost 9 games in the Premier League, through 27 games, that's a high lose. It's just high losses there. 9 games and you're sitting 4th.
I think it's consistency, isn't it? It's consistency. They lose, but they win. They don't draw too many Spurs. And that's probably why they're still there. And I think they're a little bit fortunate that Newcastle, obviously, with the Carabao Cup, sort of took their eye off off the league a little bit for a few weeks, but seem to have found a bit of form again.
Yeah, 3 draws is all Tottenham have had, which is the same as Arsenal and Leicester. Although, of course, as we know, Arsenal have won a heck of a lot more games and sitting very pretty on top of the Premier League as things stand. As we mentioned, Tottenham's away form at the moment, not great. But going to a Southampton side that aren't doing particularly well at home either, maybe it's difficult to pin your neck on one team or the other, bear in mind your allegiances that you've played for both sides. But this is still a great opportunity for Spurs, isn't it, to get another victory on the board and, as you say, put that distance that they need between themselves and Newcastle.
Yeah, they do. It's crucial for Spurs to win this game. And as I said, Southampton don't score too many goals. And you've got Harry Kane, who's got 11 in 15 against Southampton and scored in six of the last 7 at St Mary's. You know, he's had a fantastic season. You've got Heung-min Son, who's actually had a really poor season, but has got 10 goals in 14 games against Southampton. And Richarlison's actually got 5 in 7. So they all like playing against Southampton. And you know, when Harry Kane's on the pitch, he's just a fantastic player. And I just think they've got too much firepower, Spurs, for Southampton today.
And just lastly on the Harry Kane thing then, Chris, what do you think is going to happen with him? I think he might go. I think he's broken the records at Spurs now, which I think was a big thing for him. I think if he can find somewhere where he can stay in the Premier League and chase Alan Shearer's Premier League goal scoring record, then I think he'll stay in the Premier League, but not at Spurs.